Hi, my name is Dr. Felicia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about how spiritual abuse, gaslighting, and criticism go together. Now, this video is a two-part video. This is the first part of the video, and I'm going to be talking about criticism in regards to spiritual abuse and gaslighting in both. However, in this video, I'm going to be focusing on how we criticize or how one person criticizes another. Okay, and so um, let me start out by first explaining a little bit about each concept. So we already know what spiritual abuse is. If you're not sure about what exactly it is, you can take a look at some of the videos on my channel. But basically, spiritual abuse is using spirituality as a way to harm somebody or a way to cause pain, right? And so when people are going through spiritual abuse, basically that abuse is justified under the guise of spirituality. When I talk about gaslighting, gaslighting is a way, it's an erosive process. It's what somebody does to somebody else to get them to question how accurately they can perceive the reality around them. Now, I'm sure there are tons of definitions of gaslighting that are floating around the internet. And the point I make mine very simple. Now, it's also important to understand more of what gaslighting is. So I have a video on that I would encourage you to watch because that is a really deep dive into gaslighting. But basically, gaslighting occurs when somebody is trying to control the reality or the person's ability to perceive their own reality. And when that happens, that person is easier to control. And gaslighting is an erosive process, and it's done in a deliberate way to control somebody else. And many spiritually abusive institutions use gaslighting as a way to control the people that are part of their environment. Okay. And so I also want you to understand too that when I talk about spiritually abusive institutions or spiritual abuse, it is not just religious. There can be other institutions that are not religious or maybe don't even necessarily have any overt spiritual ties or connotations that still operate in these spiritually abusive ways. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. Spiritual abuse, gaslighting, and how we criticize. In spiritually abusive environments, you'll often find that there is a power differential, right? And so when leaders especially can send this message that if you criticize somebody, especially them, then that reflects something about you. In other words, whatever you criticize, you yourself are guilty of. So I am thinking about a story. And again, when I tell stories on this channel, they're not about any specific person or situation. It's more of an amalgamation of different things that have happened to different people over time. So just keep that in mind. So if you resonate with the story, then that's great, but it's not necessarily your story. And I'm not violating anyone's confidentiality. So in this story, there was somebody that had an issue with somebody else, and they were talking with the spiritual leader of that institution. And the spiritual leader told the person that brought up the offense that they were actually guilty of what they criticized the other person about. In this situation, they said they felt that this other person was controlling them or trying to control them, and they felt that their controlling behavior was really frustrating and concerning. And the spiritual leader said, well, the reason you are criticizing this person for controlling behavior is because you yourself are a controlling person, right? And if you think about it, that actually, the thing about spiritually abusive institutions and spiritually abusive people is that they always say things that have a small kernel of truth to them. They're not going to come out and just be obvious about what their intentions are. So when you hear that, you could say, well, maybe that's the case, right? I'm sure we all at times have criticized somebody for something that we do ourselves, right? Nobody is perfect, and we all have certain issues that we probably struggle with, and we've also gotten irritated by when it comes from someone else. However, when this person, the spiritual leader said, you are criticizing this other person for being controlling because you are controlling, what that does is it causes the person who is bringing up the complaint to start doubting like their own reality, right? Am I looking at things right? Am I perceiving things right? And we have to remember that in these institutions, this is their culture. It's not just somebody saying something to somebody and them disagreeing. It's like this message is hammered home all the time. And so this person, who leveled this criticism against someone else and said, I think they're controlling and whatnot, they're now being told, hey, you are the controlling person, right? And this also happens quite frequently when people will bring up a complaint against a leader or against the institution or the structure of the institution. They'll say, well, you're always criticizing things because you have a critical spirit, or you're low vibrational, or whatever the term is, the spiritually coded language for that environment. And so what that does is it makes it very difficult for anybody to bring up any criticism. And remember, something I said before in one of my videos is that spiritually abusive environments want to control your time and your resources. But part of that, with your resources, they're not just financial resources, right? Your voice is a resource. Your ability to advocate for yourself and other people are a resource. And because spiritually abusive environments and institutions do not like being criticized, they're going to use you advocating for yourself or even bringing up a criticism as something bad. And so you have to remember too, criticism is not bad, right? And so sometimes in these environments, when they say you're being critical, like it's good, right? Think about critical thinking skills. You want critical thinking skills. Criticism itself is not bad, right? There's constructive criticism, and then there's just criticism leveled at someone else because of whatever reasons, and it doesn't bring any sort of change or growth. So I want you to remember that. I try and, like, the words that sometimes you've heard before that really bother you, when you hear criticism, right, think, well, that can be a good thing, and don't get too worked up about it. But when people are trying to control how you criticize the institution, criticize a leader, whatever it is, they're doing that because they want you to basically shut up about it. Stop bringing it up. We don't want to hear it. They are very vested in this illusion that they are perfect. And that's just not even with institutions. That could be with people too. I talked before in one of my other videos about spiritually abusive people and how to spot them. And that is something that I believe is a trait of some spiritually abusive people, is that they have a very, very difficult time dealing with any criticism against them, criticism against anybody else. They want you to just be quiet and just believe and act as if everything is good and happy all the time. And so in this situation, when you are being criticized for speaking up, what that does is you're put in a double bind here, because if you don't say anything, that causes you to doubt your reality even more. It's almost like you're seeing something, you're seeing that it's raining and you're getting wet, but you're told if you talk about the rain at all, you're a bad person. So you're seeing your clothes wet, you're seeing clouds in the sky, thunder, but you can't speak up about what you see. And then you start to doubt yourself. Well, maybe I'm just seeing things wrong. Maybe I am this type of bad person because I bring it up, right? And so that's important to think about too, because when you're being gaslit like that and you can't perceive, or you feel like you can't perceive the reality around you accurately, you become an easier target to control. On the other hand, if you speak up, that's going to give you overt attack from someone. Well, you're bringing this up because you are prideful, or you're disorganized, or whatever the thing is. And so it puts you in a very, very difficult position. I'll probably make a video later on about how to deal with those sorts of things. But it's very important to remember this is done deliberately, right? And so keep that in mind as you are navigating these environments or recovering from them, because that will help you more accurately perceive what is going on. Something that's a very important question to ask is that when someone says something like this, what do they have to gain, right? If somebody is saying, well, you are being a bad person, basically, or being, you're guilty of whatever you're criticizing, what do you think the person who says that, what do they have to gain from it, right? And if you think about it, in these types of institutions, what they gain is silence and compliance and eventually control. So it's also important to, think about that when you are going through this. It's kind of like follow the money, right? But in this case, you want to follow the benefit. Who's benefiting from saying this and why? Okay. So I hope that is helpful to you. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Have you dealt with this before? If so, how did you deal with it? And what kinds of things do you do now when you feel like you need to speak up about something? So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Book a free consultation with me to help with your spiritual abuse recovery. You can go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, or you can also click in the link in the description box. I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace and joy. Bye-bye.